The opinions expressed by the host and guests in this show are not necessarily the views of Children's Health Defense.
Good morning, CHD. Welcome to Pediatric Perspectives, where we are looking at children's health challenges from a different perspective, one that includes critical thinking. I'm going to introduce a guest in a moment who is an incredible wealth of knowledge on this topic, and that is autism, autism spectrum, neurodevelopmental delays. This is something we're going to tackle. April has been deemed Autism Acceptance Month. Now, it used to be Autism Awareness Month. And I want to make clear, we accept all our children and we love them to the best of our ability, and that's important. But I want to point something out. When we had water contamination in Flint, Michigan, we didn't celebrate the contamination and the harm done to those children. Awareness, yes, very important, but acceptance when something is happening to our children that is potentially preventable or avoidable, that's not okay. And we have this narrative of, diversity is good. And yes, diversity is good, but not if it's something that is being done to our children, causing harm. I don't need to accept that. I think that's an important distinction. Welcome back, Dr. Lindsey Wells. She's a naturopathic physician who I've heard speak at conferences. She has a wealth of knowledge on pandas that we discussed last time, and also on all the autism spectrum disorders, ADD, ADHD, and a host of other chronic health conditions that our children are facing. She's also the author of an incredible book, Super Sam and the Battle Against Pans and Pandas. And I have to tell you, it's a quick read, but it is a very important book. Thank you so much for writing that book, Lindsey. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be back.
It's great to have you back. I mean, one of the things in that book that I just have to highlight, and then we'll get on with our topic of the day, is, you point out that feelings are important to acknowledge, and it's done in such a beautiful way. And, it's like, be kind, and you guide parents on kindness, and that it's not the child's fault that they're struggling. And I just love that. The way it's done in a, cartoon child book is just beautiful. So thank you for that. It's really an important piece to our world. Anyway, we're going to dive into ASD, ADHD, anxiety, chronic health conditions. I wonder, do you have a comment or a feeling about autism acceptance or awareness?
Yeah, so I too have worked with hundreds of families who have a child with autism and their family has been impacted by autism. And it's a challenge to hear this change in terminology being used by the media, right? Because I believe that autism is a manifestation of something physiologically going on in the body, right? And I have seen time and time again that when we address the underlying root causes, we can get significant improvement in our child's overall health, their ability to potentially communicate, their social interactions, really making family dynamics significantly better. And so I believe, and my families that are in my office, we continue to look for what we can do to make that child better. And so I don't think we should be complacent. I think that we can continue to explore, find out what's going on with our children, and make a meaningful difference in their life. And so again, I work with the children that are more severe on this spectrum, but I really think that it's important that we acknowledge what our families are going through, what these children are going through, and that we continue to bring awareness and fight for them to get them better, because they are in there and they know everything that's going on, and we really shouldn't just be accepting it. I believe that there's so much more that can be done, and I see it every single day in my practice, and I think my families would agree. So anyway, it's a physiological manifestation of something else underneath, and we just need to explore further as to what that is for that child.
Beautifully put. I couldn't agree more. So with that introduction into what is happening or what could be happening, could you start with, if I'm a parent and I've got a child now who's either clearly has neurological issues or maybe they're starting to develop something, where do parents start?
This is a great question. There's so many things that can be done easily at home without even really having to work with a specialist, in my opinion. And so, what I usually tell parents to focus on is kind of cleaning up the environment, cleaning up the diet, and simple things like, for instance, maybe getting a water filter, right, to clean out some of the toxins that might be in the water. So fluoride, chlorine, things like that, that could be impacting our children. We really want to potentially change their diet. I know it can be hard with picky eating, but making better choices for them. So removing dyes, perhaps, maybe really focusing on protein and decreasing sugar for them. I also think that the home environment, some of the things that we use that we've become accustomed to, like candles, putting in fragrance in the house. Our children are so sensitive to that, right? So it actually could be working against us. So even laundry detergent, right? Kind of cleaning up those things in the house. And I also, this is not a popular opinion, but I do believe that electronics are playing a role and EMFs for our kids. And I have seen dramatic changes when parents have started to decrease the use of electronics for their children. And I understand that we, utilize that iPad, and it can be helpful for a communication, but really it can be amazing when we try to decrease that, even eliminate it. What comes out, they try to communicate more, they're more regulated, they're sleeping better, there's less tantrums, OCD, stimming, tics. It's really, I think EMFs is a big problem that we're dealing with, and more information is going to come out eventually about that, I hope.
Wow. Thank you for that introduction. I remember early on, back in the early 2000s, I was attending DAN conferences, Defeat Autism Now conferences, and there would be 1,000 parents there and great education. And there was always this emphasis, just like what you said right now, of cleaning up the water, the diet, your food, and what's in the house. And we weren't aware of EMF back then, but you're absolutely right. I mean, take a holiday from screens, turn off all Wi-Fi's, et cetera, and you may notice differences. And I thought, wow, this is really extreme. All these things these parents are being told to do. But I witnessed it, and you practice now with this population, and it's incredible what these little things can do. If a family, let's say with a severely autistic child who's nonverbal or some other extreme chronic health condition comes to you, where do you start with that?
Yeah, so with any workup, I kind of look in 5 different categories. It could be 4 or 5 different categories. The first one is looking at the microbiome, so the gut. So we know that our children with autism and even other chronic ailments, autoimmune diseases, their gut microbiome looks different. Okay, and so that is one of the key pieces here. So we want to look at their gut. We want to look at their mitochondria, which are the parts of our cells that produce energy that the body runs off of. And it's been estimated that about 60 to 80% of our children with autism have a mitochondrial dysfunction. So we would look at the mitochondria. I look at the immune system. And part of my practice that I think is different than some others is I really focus on underlying infections. And it is concerning, the infectious load in our children with autism. And I also see it again with ADHD, other anxiety, mental health disorders. But I used to think, for instance, that like vector-borne disease or Lyme disease, as you might have heard of it, is totally over here, and then we have autism over here, but it is amazing how they overlap. And I believe that every child who has a diagnosis of autism absolutely needs to be screened for underlying vector-borne diseases, including Lyme disease. And then the last one is looking at their metabolic pathways as well as like their detox pathways there. So I kind of take a whole history of the child and kind of see where they might fit into what categories there. And unfortunately, our children, they're complex. So usually, they might fit in multiple categories, but that's kind of the framework that I use in my practice, and which can feel a little overwhelming, but it's actually, I always say it provides a lot of hope to parents of like, there is so much that we can look at, and that if things come up abnormal, that's actually a great sign because we can make so much improvement there. And that's where we see the improvement in the symptoms.
As a practitioner for 35 years in the pediatric space, and I was very aware and doing the best I could with this population of chronically ill kids, one of the challenges I faced, and I'm hoping you can address this somehow. It was a lot of my families, they were already broke. I mean, they had no extra funds. And in some cases, they didn't even have relatives who could help. The full testing of what you just outlined, I'm guessing is around what, 5, 10,000, something like that?
It's very expensive, definitely in the thousands. Yes.
Yeah. And having thrown that number out there though, folks, if you're listening and you have a child who's severely affected, if there's any way you can raise that money, I mean, any way at all, and you see a provider like Dr. Lindsey Wells and you just go for it because the amount of information that comes from that directs where you go, right?
Mhm.
But
Well,
if for those families who just can't do that for whatever reason, do you have a way of sort of prioritizing where you start in a that's financially more doable?
yes. So there's a lot that you can look and explore further for just through regular blood work that you could go through insurance, right? So you can look for the underlying infections through those types of labs, or you could look for underlying nutrient deficiencies, look at maybe some of the genetics that might be impacting their detoxification pathways. So there's ways to kind of go around it. But again, there's the barrier of even getting a blood draw and the barrier of having perhaps a physician even ordering those tests. So I think kind of staying with the basics where you kind of hit different categories there of, for instance, with the gut microbiome, how do you support the gut? The number one thing is making sure the kid is pooping every single day. That's so incredibly important in our children with autism that we do see a correlation of children who are constipated having more self-injurious behaviors, more stimming behaviors, more tantrums, difficulty falling asleep. And just that simple tweak of getting them more fiber in their diet, easier said than done, more water, or even maybe adding something simple like magnesium, which is a super simple, not that expensive nutraceutical, could be effective at getting them to go to the bathroom. So I think of it like that. I also think, okay, the mitochondria, how do you best support the mitochondria? That's exercise. These kids keep them active, right? There's nothing better than exercise for building more mitochondria and supporting the mitochondria that we have. And that is free, that activity. Then, for instance, if we want to help with detox, how can we do that? Again, the activity piece for them, for sweating. We want to make sure that they're sleeping. And also helping with circadian rhythm management, I feel like is extremely helpful for their metabolic piece of getting the child outside first thing in the morning, if you can. And that just helps to set them up so that their sleep cycles are just easier. And, the child is sleeping, and that's when the lymphatic system is working in the brain to help with detoxification. So I think of those same categories, but how can we help to support them without necessarily doing a ton of out-of-pocket testing? If we can't even do testing, what are some really benign things that we can put in place that actually they're the foundation of health that can get us to where we want to be?
If you're listening to this, you're probably getting the idea that this is a process, right? It's not a quick fix. When our kids are struggling at a significant level physiologically and it's showing up with neurodevelopmental issues, there's a lot that needs to be worked through, right? Some of the testing, though, that is often out of pocket, are there any of those tests that you would just say, wow, in my experience, this has been a game changer?
For the testing, the first one is an organic acid test. So the organic acid test looks at about 87 different metabolites. It looks at infectious metabolites, including yeast, which tends to be a big issue in our children with autism. And so that gives us a clue. It also looks at Clostridia and some bacterial markers. It looks at mitochondrial markers, which again can help to see if mitochondrial dysfunction is playing a role. It looks at some neurotransmitter markers, as well as some nutritional markers as well. So that is like the biggest bang for your buck, that particular test. And so that is one that I try to get a baseline on for any child who's coming into my office who has a neurodevelopmental disorder. And I find that we get a lot of information just from that one test. And then if we had more funds, I do like to explore also the vector-borne piece. So ruling out Lyme disease, Babesia, and Bartonella, because that has absolutely changed treatment plan and has been a huge game changer of is this something that could be impacting your child? And then the last one, which I'm sure people may have heard about because it was out in the media a lot, is looking for the folate receptor autoantibodies for cerebral folate deficiency in children with autism. And this one, in my opinion, it's great to have the information, but this is such an effective therapy with folinic acid that I am at the point where I am utilizing high dose folinic acid even without that test, because we know those autoantibodies fluctuate. So it's possible when I draw that child's blood, they might be negative at that time, but this could be a true game changer for this child. And so that's one that a lot of people have inquired about, and I do it a lot in my practice, but that's one that I think you can almost say, hey, maybe we should just do a therapeutic trial of it rather than, spending the few $100s to get that test done.
Yeah, I was doing that a lot in my practice, just therapeutic trial, and sometimes it was miraculous.
Yes.
And that's the thing for families who are dealing with chronically affected children. Not everything works for every child. In fact, you'll have, I remember one of the first things I learned as a pediatrician who knew nothing about this space was the gluten-free, dairy-free
Yes.
diet. It wasn't effective very often, but man, I had a few cases where a nonverbal, severely autistic child in distress comes in talking full sentences and like, what the heck? So
Yes.
yeah, you bring up a very good point. And all those things that you mentioned were not in the thousands of dollars. I mean, these are tests that are, $100, $200, $300, something like that, that hopefully most people would find a way to make that happen, because it can be night and day for your child. What other thoughts do you have for families who are struggling? Maybe speak to, we've started now with, you're new to this. How about those families who've tried, they feel like they've tried everything?
Right.
And yeah, maybe they've had little gains here and there, but they're still nowhere near where they'd like to be with their child. Is that a different approach at that point?
Yeah, and so that's where I find the infections actually tend to be underneath those, or potentially there's mold exposure. And so really trying to look at those types of, just ruling those out. I find that can help us like make progress. Like if I have a child that's just stuck, okay, and so it's like there's something else there that we're not aware of, and so that's when we go digging a little bit deeper. And so for those families, I'd say really look deeper for the infections, rule out mold exposure there. And then I've had some great success with using helminth therapy, actually, HDCs, which is a little, some people might feel a little uncomfortable with it, but it actually is just a treatment to help support the microbiome. And that also has shown a lot of promise in my practice for those families that are like, we're just not really getting, where we're not where we want to be. It's like it moves us forward. And sometimes we can even stabilize a child just on doing that intervention.
I was very excited about helmet therapy and the HDCs. I was actually trying to set up a farm, and I didn't have the bandwidth to do it. But it's definitely worth looking into, and I'm glad to know that that's something you do. That's
Yes.
wonderful.
Yes.
So just for a sense of perspective for the families who have the severely affected kids and who aren't getting, I think almost every child will have progress when they work with a provider like as yourself who really gets this. What percentage of the severe kids who were completely dependent on parental care 24/7, what percentage of those kids end up being able to be independent if they get the proper care?
Yeah. It's a great question. I do think that at least 25%, and I'm seeing that even actually increase now with Spell to Communicate, using the spelling boards. It's like just unlocking these children, and they're able to communicate and show all of their abilities. And that has been absolutely, it's been one of the greatest honors of my career, to be able to talk to my severely autistic adults, and just the opportunities have exploded for them, getting college degrees, finding out about their interests. Again, these might have been children or adults that would go into homes, that are not anymore. Maybe they're going to be able to have jobs. It's just been unbelievable. But I think with the biomedical intervention that we talked about, we definitely see significant improvement where they are able to be, more independent, for sure, being able to express themselves, to really get to know that person that's inside there. They're absolutely inside.
Yeah.
And so, of course, we always want more. And I am constantly researching and getting involved in doing research to get out information about game changers for our children in order for them to reach their full potential, which it's in there. It's just how do we help them?
The movie Spellers is about that spell to communicate movement. It's very labor intensive. So parents, if you're going to do it, let's say you don't have the funds to hire somebody to do that for your child. If there's any way you can pull off learning that technique, that skill, it's incredible. I know a few of the kids who are in that movie, a couple of them very well, and they said, and they can talk now. I mean, like one of them has gone through college, or a couple of them have, that 80% of the nonverbal autistic kids that they know, and they know they're in that world, they know a lot, are all there and incredibly intelligent, as you've pointed out. So parents, remember that. Treat your child as if they understand and know everything. They just can't communicate. And what a gift Spell to Communicate has been for those kids who are locked in. They're there. It's incredible. I want to give you the last word on this whole space. I know you have a moms group that, parents often will feel alone. Maybe they don't know other moms or other families who are going through what they're going through. Close it out with the message of hope for our families who are dealing with chronically ill children. And maybe also, second part of the question, touch on your take on the causes, because if there are causes we can address, we won't have as much to deal with down the road.
Yeah, so when it comes to causes, I think it's multifactorial. There's not just one thing that is contributing to our children being chronically ill, but we have a lot of work that we need to be doing, right? So our kids, their toxic burden is just unbelievable. These children are constantly exposed to environmental toxins, our food being an issue there, the water being an issue, vaccines, immunizations being also a contributor here for children who are already, vulnerable. Under the underlying infections is another huge piece. So we have a lot that our kids are under. I also think the EMFs, as I mentioned before, not all of us went through that. Growing up, it's a very different world than where our kids are now. And so there are so many things that we need to take into consideration. And it's usually not just one, it's multifactorial with many of those exposures that I had just mentioned. Now, when it comes to the message, what I'd leave you with, I think the biggest thing is, trust yourself as a parent. Your child better than any other provider, and, really work with somebody who listens to you. And I also want to close out that there is hope. There is always hope. It does not matter your child's age. I always hear that there's this magic number of, my child is about to be 6. I have to do all of these things because that's somehow this magic age that we think we're not going to make any progress after that. Or my child is a young adult, they've been through puberty, or they're an adult, we just have to, this is just what it is. There is always room for improvement, and it does not matter the age of the child or the adult, and that they're in there. And I hope, and for all of you, that you get to meet and your child who's truly underneath and inside there, because they're waiting to meet, for you to be able to communicate with you. And so that's what I would leave you with. And I do have, it's called the Well-Minded Mamas Group. It's a little community of mothers who have children with complex medical conditions. And what we do is we meet once a month and we all just kind of get it. We understand what each other has been through, what they're going through. It's a space of just being open and honest, as well as providing hope. And we work on helping to regulate ourselves, right? Because it is so easy. We are so impacted by what's going on with our children that when we are regulated and when we are feeling our best, our kids get better at the same time without us doing any new interventions, because they are so connected to us. And it's such a beautiful thing. But it is a reminder that we must take care of ourselves in order to also help and take care of them.
That is beautiful. And one last thing, you are based in Connecticut, but I think you are able to provide online consultations. How would people reach you?
Yeah, so you can reach me through my website, lindseywellsnd.com. And in the top, you can click on Patient Portal and register as a new patient. So that's the easiest way to get in contact. My staff is wonderful. So if you have questions, you can always call my office as well, but you can find my contact info on my website.
Thank you so much, Dr. Wells. You are a gift to this world and to our children. Thank you for coming back on Pediatric Perspectives.
Thank you.
Well, folks, it is just always a pleasure to be with you. I look forward to seeing you next week. You can always reach me at kidsfirstforever.com, whether you want coaching or more information on a host of things. And I look forward to seeing you next week.
Tell us your name.
Kyle Young.
And so we're going to start with the first one, which is the flu vaccine. We've got 3 stories here, people. Let's start with the flu vaccine. Tell us what happened to you.
1971, I'm a freshman in college at Faith Baptist Bible College in Ankeny, Iowa. There's some sort of flu bug going around. The college told students that the flu vaccine would be mandatory for all students. Small school, I think there was only like 400 students. And I was 17, still a minor. Got in line, took the shot, got pneumonia, thought I was going to die. I was deathly sick. And there was 3 or 4 or 5 nights where I didn't think I was going to make it through the night. And long story short, I survived. I made it through, I recovered, went back home, told my parents, this was over Christmas break, and went in to see the family doctor. He looked at my lungs and said, man, you were lucky to make it. Your lungs are terribly scarred. So I tell the story because that turned me off to all vaccines from that time on. So that was in 1971.
So you've never had a vaccination since?
Not since then. And I've been, researching and looking into them ever since then as well. But yeah, I was a minor. I mean, nobody asked me. They said, hey, you're a minor. We need your parents' consent because you're a minor to give you this shot. Nobody asked anything about that. Nobody asked my consent or my parents' consent. Anyhow, my parents weren't happy when they found out about it. I, needless to say, kind of lost interest in that school and that religion, actually, to some extent. But anyhow, once, years rolled by and other, swine flus and bird flus and Zikas and all these other things started coming about, and with every one there was a new vaccine that was supposed to be the cure-all, and I just avoided all of them. And then when the COVID program rolled out, I just thought, wow, this seems like it's going to be the granddaddy of all. And hindsight turns out it was. So I didn't take the vaccine, but my mom did. She was 93. Actually, I think she was 92 at the time when she took the vaccine. Her birthday is 1st of May. No, she was 93. She had just turned 93. And she was in an assisted care facility in Topeka, Kansas. I had just been to see her about a year earlier. She was in good health, highly conversational, great appetite, 93 years, doing great. And then the assisted care facility had a mandate for the COVID vaccine. And meanwhile, they had just built a brand new, massive, largest cell phone tower I've ever seen, right across the street from her window. I mean, literally, this thing was no more than 200 yards away from her window. Massive cell tower with all the latest stuff, 5G and everything on it. And they turned that tower on. I did some research on this and found out they turned that tower on in June. She got the shot in the COVID shots in, I believe, late May, possibly early June. And then my brother called me he lives nearby in Topeka. I'm here in Arizona. He called me in, must have been about July, and said, Mom's taking a turn for the worse, and she's really going downhill quickly. And then in August, late August, he called me and said, you better get back here. I don't think she's going to last much longer. So I flew back to Topeka and spent 24 hours with her, and then she passed the next day. That was, I believe, the last, first or second, maybe the 3rd of September. And so this is, what, 3.5 months after she got the COVID vaccine.
Did she only have one COVID vaccine?
No, she had the first two.
And do you know if it's Pfizer or Moderna?
Pfizer. Yeah. I did look into that because while I was at her facility, the 24 hours before she died, I did some investigating around with the facility, talked to some employees, talked to some other people my age who had parents in the facility, and was able to glean some information. I found out about the cell tower and when it was built, and that it was recent because it hadn't been there. It wasn't there the year before when I was there to visit her the year before, and I learned that that it was the Pfizer jab that was given to everybody there in that particular facility. So, and then I lost an in-law, my niece's husband, who, like so many people, I'm sort of the black sheep in the family because I'm the person that didn't take the jabs, and I write a blog. I've been writing a blog for over 3 years about.
Where do you write your blog?
On Substack.
Tell people what it is.
It's The Secular Heretic.
And slowly?
The Secular Heretic.
Okay.
And at Substack.com. And so, as I said, I've been researching vaccines since I was 17, essentially. I didn't get heavily into it until I started writing this blog. In fact, it was as a farmer in Arivaca, my farmer's market was closed due to the pandemic, and so I lost my income and I had to go on unemployment. And I got unemployment, and I had been doing all this research, and I thought, wow, a golden opportunity to do some more research and maybe start a blog, which I'd been thinking about doing. So I was unemployed for quite a while, and over a year. And so I started writing this blog, and I had just all this time to do all this research, and started learning more and more. Of course, I found you guys early on, and I think I actually knew about CHD before COVID came around. Watched a lot of your shows, your early ones especially, and then started writing this blog and researching and looking into all the aspects of it. I even look into the whole question about the existence of the virus, and has this COVID virus even been isolated, and what has metagenomic sequencing, and what's that all about, and does this virus actually only exist in silico? Where is a photo of the full intact virus, one that's actually been removed from a human body? I still haven't seen that. I've asked many people to show me that virus. I still have not been shown an intact virus. I know this is a controversial topic. I hope I'm not.
I'm of the opinion that everything should be discussed and everyone should have the right to have their own opinion, and you're teaching us and we're listening. And I also do want to know about the cell tower though. That was the third thing.
Yeah. I just want to say one more quick thing about this. The reason I went off on this no virus track is because I happen to know Dr. Tom Cowan, who's one of the vocal critics of the whole virus theory thing. I've known him for about 8 years, and he was one of the first people to start speaking out about the whole thing when the whole COVID thing came around, and he's the person that got me to go down the rabbit hole, virus rabbit hole. And so I've been following him and the Salmon Mark Bailey out of New Zealand, number of other doctors that Stefan Lanke in Germany, all these other doctors that have done a pretty good job of disputing the existence of any causative virus. But yeah, so as to the cell towers, so in July, early July, like maybe the first or second day of July of last year, I drank 5 gallons of water.
On purpose?
No, not on purpose, because I felt thirsty. I didn't, it just wasn't all of a sudden happen on one day kind of a thing. It had been building up for about a year, and the amount of water I needed to satiate my thirst as well as keep some symptoms at bay just kept increasing. And then this one day I drank 5 gallons, which was the most I'd ever drank. About 4 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon, I went out to do chores, to take care of the goats, and I stopped at one of my gates, and I vomited over the course of about 30 minutes 11 times, just boom, boom, boom. And I just felt really bad afterwards. And so I thought, okay, this is really serious, and what's been causing all this? I had suspected cell towers because they had just put a new cell tower up near my house. Well, they had upgraded it. There was an existing cell tower and they had upgraded it. And then they had just put in a new one a little bit further, but it's just over the horizon from my house a little bit. And all of these symptoms that I was experiencing, kind of a throbbing and a thirst and lack of energy and a number of other things, all correlated with the introduction of these new cell towers. So I went to my neighbor's house after I got sick, and I said, hey, can you drive me into the hospital? It's an hour's drive to the nearest hospital from where I live. And he did, and this was a Banner hospital here in Tucson. And checked in, emergency room, sitting in the emergency waiting room, been there a couple of minutes. I leaned over to my friend and neighbor, Casey, and I said, hey, Casey, I'm going to throw up again. And I just stood up and I just spewed all over the floor of the waiting room 11 more times. And that's a really good way to get in to see the doctor right away, by the way, because I got in right after that. And so they ran a series of tests, and they said, you're depleted of salt. There's some terminology for that. I don't remember what it is. So turns out what had happened, all the water had just leached all the salt out of my body, and I was experiencing some of the symptoms I was experiencing were due to the salt depletion. So they put me in the ICU. I was in there for 5 days. And I told them, I said, because I didn't know what their policy was. I heard about some hospitals just automatically they give you a COVID jab if you get checked in. And I told them, I said, I'll let you admit me if you promise not to give me any vaccines and you let me dictate what medicines I take and what medicines I don't take. They hemmed and hawed about that, but they eventually agreed to it. And now here our local chapter is setting up a legal document that anybody can sign and send out to their hospital ahead of time, so that if you ever get into an emergency situation and you don't want to get jabbed, or you want to be able to tell the doctors what medicines you want to take or not take, our local CHD chapter is putting together a document and that you can fill out and submit to your hospital ahead of time. So yeah, I should probably shut this down, but I got out of the hospital. They wanted to give me a number of different medicines. I did refuse some. They had me on a saline drip. I was taking saline tablets. Got out, went home. A few days later, I was watching Dr. Lee Merritt online, who is kind of an outspoken critic of the whole medical establishment. And she was talking about how she had a lot of patients who noticed that as soon as cell towers went up, their demand for more water also increased. So that was sort of verification for me that there's something about the effect that cell towers have on the human body that disrupts the water in our body. And if you've ever read The Fourth Phase of Water by what's that guy, he's got a Polish name, doctor, I can't think of his name. He talks about how, and Dr. Tom Cowan has talked about that too, how 5G can disrupt the structure of the water in our body and really wreak havoc. So
what are you going to do about the fact that you've got a 5G tower right by you?
Yeah, I've just, I do a number of things. I think a lot of it has to do with the combination of the tower and the technologies that are in the pegylated lipid nanoparticles that were part of the Trojan horse technology that carries the spike protein, theoretically carries the spike protein through the cell wall into the cell wall to deliver the spike protein intact so it doesn't get destroyed in the bloodstream before it gets there. So the pegylated lipid nanotechnologies are loaded with graphene oxide and barium, strontium, aluminum, a bunch of other toxic metals. And we've all, as kids, we've all put iron filings on a table and run a magnet under the table and watch the iron filings form into geometric patterns and shapes. And that's exactly what happens with these heavy metals that are in the jabs, and they're also in the chemtrails when we get exposed to these EMFs, especially the cell towers and our cell phones as well. It takes these particles and forms them into geometric shapes and micro robots. I mean, if you really want to go down the rabbit hole on this, it's a deep one. Dr. Anna Mihalcha has done a lot of really great research on this. She has a PhD in pathology. She's also a medical doctor. She's a smart gal. I really recommend people look at her stuff. Yeah, and I'd love it if CHD would start covering some of this stuff.
You should contact our science department and speak to Dr. Brian Hooker.
Okay.
That's what they do.
He does some great pieces.
Yep,
I really admire his work.
Thank you. It's most entertaining and very interesting. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.